They sell you the silence. That's the pitch. Come work at Outpost Echo, they said. Unplug. Get away from the noise. Listen to the earth. It pays exceptionally well, which should have been the first red flag. Places don't pay you six figures to sit in blissful quiet out in the middle of the Wyoming high desert unless the quiet comes with complications. My name's Ben, and I took the job because my student loans were staging a hostile takeover of my future, and frankly, the idea of getting away from everything sounded pretty damn good after a messy breakup. Outpost Echo isn't much to look at. Just a squat, prefabricated building bolted to a concrete slab, surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. Solar panels glint on the roof, and a single, skeletal radio tower pierces the ridiculously vast sky. Inside, it's functional, sterile. A small living quarters, bunk, kitchenette, shower that spits lukewarm water. Then the main operations room, banks of servers humming quietly, monitors displaying endless seismograph readings, geological data streams, and weather patterns. My job? Monitor the equipment, run diagnostics, change out data drives, and report any significant anomalies. Simple. Mind-numbingly simple, most days. The silence, though. They weren't kidding about that. It's profound. Oppressive, almost. Miles and miles of sagebrush, rock formations like sleeping giants in the distance, and wind. Always the wind, whispering or howling, but never really breaking that fundamental quiet. You hear your own heartbeat, the blood rushing in your ears. You start thinking too much. That's the real danger, I thought initially. Loneliness. Cabin fever. The guy I replaced, Henderson, seemed eager to leave. Our handover was brief, conducted via a crackly video call the day before I flew into the nearest small town and drove the rented Jeep 3 hours out here. He looked like he hadn't slept in weeks, dark circles under his eyes, constantly glancing over his shoulder even though he was clearly in a hotel room somewhere. Just watch the K-gamma readings, especially during inversion layers, he'd said, his voice tight. And if Array 7 starts putting out recursive echoes, just log it. Don't try to triangulate. And for God's sake, never run the deep resonance scan during a recursive event. Protocol says you wait 12 hours clear. Recursive echoes? Deep resonance scan? That wasn't in the manual, I'd replied, frowning. Henderson had laughed, a short, sharp bark devoid of humor. Lot of things aren't in the manual, kid. Just, listen to me. Log it. Wait it out. Don't get curious. He'd ended the call abruptly after that, leaving me with more questions than answers. My first week was uneventful. I settled into a routine. Wake up, make coffee that tasted faintly of dust, check the overnight logs, run diagnostics, read, watch downloaded movies, stare out at the unchanging landscape, sleep. The silence was weird, but manageable. I put on music sometimes, but it felt intrusive, wrong somehow. It was Tuesday of the second week when things started feeling off. It began subtly. A low hum that wasn't the servers. It felt like it was coming from the ground itself, a subaudible vibration that tickled the soles of my feet through the concrete floor. I checked the seismographs, nothing. Not a tremor, not a quake. Just the background noise of a geologically stable region. But the feeling persisted, intermittent, faint. Then Array 7 lit up. It was a series of sensors buried deeper than the others, designed to pick up faint, far-off tectonic whispers. The readings were bizarre. Not the sharp spikes of an earthquake, nor the rolling waves of distant activity. It was rhythmic. A slow, steady pulse, like a colossal heartbeat, deep beneath the earth. Thump, 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 spaced seconds apart. It lasted maybe 5 minutes, then faded. I logged it, just like Henderson said. Recursive echo event, Array 7. Time, duration, peak amplitude. Added a note, rhythmic pattern observed. Unknown origin. It happened again the next night. Same time, just after 2 a.m. Same rhythmic pulse. This time, it lasted longer, nearly 15 minutes. And the hum I'd been feeling. It intensified during the event, a low-frequency thrum that vibrated through the chair, up my spine. Again, I logged it. Again, I told myself it was faulty equipment, geological oddities, anything rational. But Henderson's warning echoed in my mind. Don't get curious. Curiosity, however, is a hard habit to break when you're surrounded by nothing but questions. The manual said the deep resonance scan was used to map subsurface geological structures, sending powerful, focused sonic pulses deep into the crust and analyzing the return signals. Standard procedure for verifying potential resource deposits or mapping fault lines. Nothing inherently dangerous about it. So why the warning? Why never run it during a recursive event? The third night it happened, the rhythmic pulsing started earlier, around midnight. It felt stronger. The hum was louder, almost audible now, a deep bass note resonating in my chest cavity. The monitors showed the pattern clearly, steady and slow. Thump, thump, thump. I stared at the console for the deep resonance scan. It was just a button, a sequence to initiate. Henderson's panicked face flashed in my memory. Don't get curious. But what if this was something? Something important. What if it was a geological phenomenon nobody had documented? My name could be on the paper. Screw it. Henderson was probably just paranoid from the isolation. My hand hovered over the sequence initiation button. The rhythmic thump continued, echoing faintly through the room, through the floor. Thump, thump, thump. It felt expectant. I initiated the deep resonance scan sequence. For a second, nothing happened. The servers whirred. The lights hummed. The slow pulse on Array 7's monitor continued. Thump, thump, thump. Then, all hell broke loose. The moment the sonic pulse fired downwards, the rhythmic signal on Array 7 went absolutely berserk. The steady thump became a frantic, chaotic frenzy, spiking off the charts. Alarms blared from half a dozen consoles simultaneously, seismic overload, equipment stress warnings, power fluctuations. The lights flickered violently. And the hum became a roar. A deep, guttural, physical roar that slammed into the building. It wasn't just sound, it was pressure. My ears popped painfully. The concrete floor vibrated so intensely I could barely stand. It felt like the entire outpost was inside a giant subwoofer cranked to maximum. But the worst part wasn't the shaking or the alarms. It was the sound that came back through the Array 7 sensors, amplified by the system before the overload safeties could kick in. It wasn't an echo. It wasn't seismic noise. It was a scream. A long, drawn-out, multi-tone shriek of what sounded like pure, unadulterated agony mixed with unimaginable rage, erupting from miles beneath my feet. It ripped through the speakers for maybe 3 seconds before the system automatically cut the audio feed, but the sound was burned into my brain. Then, silence. Abrupt, total silence. The alarms stopped. The monitors went dark. The emergency lights flickered on, casting the operations room in a dim, sickly red glow. The power was out. My heart was hammering against my ribs. My ears were ringing. I stumbled towards the main console, trying to get reserve power online, trying to understand what had just happened. That scream, it wasn't geological. It wasn't mechanical. It sounded alive. And furious. As I fumbled with the backup generator switch, one monitor flickered weakly back to life, the feed from the exterior security camera pointed at the main gate. The image was grainy, distorted by the low red light and power fluctuations. But it was clear enough to show something clinging to the outside of the chain-link fence. It was large, hunched, impossibly thin, with limbs bent at angles that didn't look right. Its head was craned towards the outpost building, towards me. Even in the distorted image, I could see 2 points of light reflecting the faint emergency lighting. Eyes. Watching. Then the monitor went black again, along with the emergency lights. Plunging me into absolute, suffocating darkness, miles from anywhere, with the echo of that subterranean scream still ringing in my ears, and the image of those watching eyes burned onto my retinas. And the only sound left was the frantic, terrified pounding of my own heart. Darkness. Absolute and complete. It pressed in from all sides, thick and suffocating, swallowing the faint afterimage of the red emergency lights. My own ragged breathing sounded impossibly loud in the sudden, total silence. The ringing in my ears slowly subsided, replaced by the frantic thudding in my chest and the low hum that seemed to emanate not from the now dead equipment, but from the very bones of the building, or perhaps the earth beneath it. That deep, resonant vibration that had preceded the chaos felt different now, imbued with a menacing quality it hadn't possessed before. My first thought was light. I needed light. I patted myself down, fumbling for the tactical flashlight that was supposed to be clipped to my belt as part of the standard outpost gear. Gone. Must have fallen off during the violent shaking. Panic tightened its icy grip. I was blind, trapped in a metal box miles from anywhere, with something monstrous just outside. Taking slow, deliberate breaths, I tried to orient myself. The main console bank was ahead of me, the backup generator controls to the left, near the reinforced main door. Getting there meant navigating the operations room, a space cluttered with chairs, equipment racks, and probably debris shaken loose by the event. I pushed myself up from the floor, my legs trembling. Every instinct screamed at me to stay down, to curl into a ball and wait for morning, but the image of those glowing eyes staring in from the fence spurred me into motion. Waiting wasn't an option. Extending my hands like a blind man, I shuffled forward, my boots scraping softly on the floor. I bumped into a chair, sending it skittering away with a clatter that echoed horribly in the stillness. I froze, listening. Was that a low growl from outside, or just the wind picking up? The hum from the earth seemed to intensify for a moment, a palpable pressure against my skin. I held my breath, straining to hear over the pounding in my ears. Nothing. Just the wind. Moving more cautiously, I found the wall and traced it with my fingertips, navigating past humming server racks that were now unervingly silent. My hand brushed against something metallic and cold, a fallen toolkit. My fingers closed around the familiar shape of a heavy-duty maglite. Relief washed over me, so potent it almost buckled my knees. I fumbled with the switch, twisting the head. A weak, yellowish beam cut through the oppressive darkness. It wasn't much, but it was everything. The flashlight beam danced nervously around the room, revealing minor chaos, papers scattered, a monitor tilted askew, the chair I'd knocked over. Nothing seemed seriously damaged structurally, which was a small mercy. My priority was the generator. I swept the light towards the main door, towards the control panel. That's when I heard it. A distinct scrape. Metal on metal. Coming from outside. Near the air intake vent on the wall to my right. I froze again, aiming the weak beam at the grated vent near the ceiling. Dust motes danced in the light. Another scrape, louder this time, followed by a low, wet, sniffing sound. It was at the vent. Testing it. Trying to find a way in. My blood ran cold. The outpost was supposed to be secure, sealed against the elements, maybe even biological contaminants according to some obscure passages in the manual I'd skimmed. But was it sealed against that? I forced myself to move towards the generator panel, trying to ignore the chilling sounds from the vent. My hands, slick with cold sweat, fumbled with the panel cover, dropping a screw that pinged off the concrete floor. The sniffing stopped. Replaced by a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the metal wall. It knew I was here. It knew I was trying to restore power. With trembling fingers, I located the manual override switch for the backup generator. I flipped it. A low cough sputtered from the generator unit housed in a reinforced compartment nearby, then silence. I tried again. Another sputter, followed by a weak attempt to turn over, like a car refusing to start on a frozen morning. Come on, I whispered desperately. The scraping sound returned, now faster, more frantic, coming from multiple points along the outer wall. It wasn't just at the vent anymore. It was circling. Testing. On the third try, the generator roared to life. Not full power, but enough. Emergency lights flickered back on, the dim, unsettling red glow returned, banishing the total darkness but replacing it with a landscape of long, dancing shadows. Several monitors on the main console flickered, displaying error messages or static. Hope surged, quickly followed by dread as I realized what limited power might reveal. The sniffing and scraping outside stopped the instant the generator kicked in. Replaced by an unnerving silence. Was it scared off by the noise and lights? Or was it just, watching again? Waiting? I moved cautiously towards the main console, keeping the flashlight beam pointed towards the door and windows, though the windows were reinforced panels with only small, thick observation slits near the top, offering little view out or in. The monitors were mostly useless. System failures, sensor overloads, data corruption warnings. Array 7 was completely offline, catastrophic sensor damage, the diagnostic read. Whatever that scream was, whatever my scan had provoked, it had physically wrecked the deep sensors. Then, one monitor blinked, displaying a low-resolution, flickering image. The exterior camera. Not the main gate feed this time, but one mounted high on the radio tower, offering a wider, top-down view of the outpost and its immediate surroundings. The image was worse than before, washed out by the red emergency lights reflecting off lingering dust or maybe even rain starting to fall outside. But there was no mistaking the shapes. There wasn't just one creature. There were three. They were moving slowly around the perimeter fence, long, skeletal limbs unfolding, hunched back straightening slightly. They were impossibly tall, gaunt, moving with a jerky, unnatural gait. In the distorted red light, their skin looked pale, almost translucent, stretched taut over sharp bone structures. They paused near the main gate, their heads turning in unison towards the building. Towards the faint hum of the generator. Towards me. One of them lowered its head and made that sniffing sound again, louder now, echoing slightly in the open desert air. It took a step towards the fence, placing a multi-jointed, clawed hand against the chain link. The fence bowed inward slightly under the minimal pressure. Then, the monitor went dead. Just like before. Power fluctuation. Or did they do something? Could they affect the electronics? I backed away from the console, heart pounding. 3 of them. And the fence looked like it wouldn't offer much resistance. I swept the flashlight beam around the room, searching for, what? A weapon. There was the toolkit, a fire extinguisher, maybe a heavy wrench. Useless against creatures like that. My light fell on the reinforced steel door. Multiple deadbolts, internal locking mechanisms. It was designed to keep things out. But seeing those things, their size, the ease with which one had bent the fence, suddenly the door didn't feel nearly secure enough. And then I heard a new sound. Not from outside. From inside. A faint, rhythmic tapping. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the floor. Near the center of the operations room. I aimed the flashlight down. Nothing but smooth concrete. Tap, tap, tap. Louder now. More insistent. Coming from beneath the concrete slab the outpost was built on. My blood turned to ice. Henderson's warning. The scream from deep underground. Array 7 picking up rhythmic pulses. Tap. 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 A hairline crack appeared on the concrete floor, right where the tapping seemed loudest. Then another, spiderwebbing outwards. Dust puffed up from the cracks. Whatever had screamed, whatever I had angered with that scan, it wasn't miles away anymore. It was right here. Right underneath me. And it wanted in. Tap. Tap. Crack. The sound was sharp, brittle, like ice fracturing under pressure. More cracks radiated outwards from the center of the floor, forming a jagged, ugly starburst under the weak red emergency lights. Dust puffed with each insistent tap, which now came faster, harder, more like hammer blows than tentative taps. The entire concrete slab beneath my feet seemed to hum in resonant sympathy with the force striking it from below. My mind raced, desperately trying to process the impossible reality. Something was under the outpost, something strong enough to break through reinforced concrete, and it was doing so right now. The memory of the subterranean scream, agony and rage, flashed through my mind. Had I not just angered it, but guided it? Had the resonance scan acted like a beacon, showing it exactly where I was? The flashlight beam trembled in my hand as I swept it around the room. Escape. The main door was steel, reinforced, but those things were outside. 3 of them. Could they hear the commotion from below? Would this breach draw them in? Hiding? Where? The small living quarters offered minimal cover. The server racks were sturdy but offered no real protection. Crack. A larger piece of concrete splintered upwards, falling back down with a thud. The tapping stopped, replaced by a low, scraping sound, like immense weight being dragged across rock. Then came a deep, wet, guttural hiss that seemed to seep up from the cracks, carrying a charnel smell, earthy and foul, like long stagnant water and decay. My eyes darted to the main console. Most systems were still down, but one small monitor near the bottom flickered, the internal atmospheric sensors. Pressure readings were fluctuating wildly. Temperature near the floor sensor was dropping rapidly. Something was actively altering the environment inside the sealed outpost. Think, Ben, think. Henderson's warnings. Don't get curious. Too late for that. Never run the deep resonance scan during a recursive event. Way too late for that. Was there anything else? Anything useful? I vaguely recalled a section in the thick manual about structural integrity breaches, something about emergency foam sealants housed in wall compartments. Designed for meteor impacts or seismic damage, ridiculously unlikely scenarios out here. Until now. I scanned the walls, flashlight beam bouncing nervously. There. Near the kitchenette area, a panel marked, Emergency Sealant, Unit B. It was worth a shot. Anything was better than waiting for whatever was down there to emerge. Keeping one eye on the cracking floor, I moved towards the panel. The scraping sound intensified, accompanied by a wet, slurping noise that turned my stomach. The floor in the center began to visibly bulge upwards. I reached the panel, ripped it open. Inside was a canister that looked like an oversized fire extinguisher, with a hose and nozzle attached. Instructions printed on the side showed a simple trigger mechanism. Rapid expansion polymer foam, seals breaches up to 1 square meter. The damaged area was already bigger than that, and growing. Crunch. A section of the floor the size of a dinner plate collapsed inwards, falling into the darkness below with a shower of concrete dust. The hissing intensified, louder, closer. I could feel a cold draft swirling up from the hole. I aimed the nozzle towards the breach. Just as I was about to pull the trigger, I heard it again. Metal scraping on metal. Outside. At the main door. My blood ran cold. The creatures outside. They'd heard the generator, they'd seen the lights, and now maybe they'd heard the floor breaking. They were testing the door. A heavy thump reverberated through the steel door, followed by the shriek of stressed metal. They weren't just testing it, they were attacking it. I was trapped. A terrifying, unknown force breaking through the floor, and 3 monstrous entities trying to smash their way through the main entrance. The foam, it might slow down whatever was coming from below, but it wouldn't stop it. And it would do nothing against the creatures at the door. Another boom slammed against the door, louder this time. I could see the steel beginning to buckle inwards near the handle. They were strong. Far stronger than they looked. The hissing from the floor breach intensified, turning into a series of wet, clicking sounds. Something was definitely ascending. A choice, immediate and stark, presented itself. Try to seal the floor and face the creatures at the door. Or abandon the foam, hope the door holds for a few more minutes, and prepare for whatever was climbing out of the earth. Henderson's words again, listen to me. Log it. Wait it out. Waiting it out wasn't an option. Logging it seemed absurd. But listening. The sounds from the floor felt, slower. More deliberate than the frantic assault on the door. Maybe the floor entity was weaker. Or just taking its time. Decision made, however flawed. I dropped the foam canister, it clattered uselessly to the floor, and scrambled towards the darkest corner of the operations room, behind the largest bank of now-dead servers. I needed cover, something solid between me and both threats. I grabbed the heaviest wrench I could find from the fallen toolkit as I moved, its weight cold and inadequate in my hand. I wedged myself into the corner, flashlight off, heart pounding against my ribs. I strained my ears, trying to parse the cacophony. The rhythmic, thunderous blows against the main door continued, each impact shaking the small building. The scraping and clicking from the floor breach grew louder, closer. I could hear small chunks of concrete skittering across the floor as the hole widened. Then, the sounds from the floor changed. A wet, tearing sound, followed by a thick, heavy thump as something substantial landed on the concrete inside the room. Then another. And another. The hissing was replaced by a series of low, guttural clicks and pops, like chitinous plates rubbing together. Something was in the room with me. Multiple somethings. And the assault on the door stopped. An unnerving, almost complete silence descended, broken only by the faint hum of the generator and the wet, clicking sounds emanating from the center of the room, near the breach. Why had they stopped? Had they gotten in? Had the things from the floor dealt with them? Or were they all just listening? Waiting? I risked tilting my head just enough to peek around the edge of the server rack. The red emergency lights cast everything in demonic hues. Near the ragged hole in the floor, three shapes were unfolding themselves. They weren't large, perhaps the size of big dogs, but their forms were nightmarish. Insectoid, with multiple spindly legs ending in sharp points, bodies covered in a segmented, dripping black carapace. They had no discernible heads, just clusters of glowing red eyes near the front of their hunched thoraxes, and long, whip-like antennae twitching, tasting the air. They clicked and popped, turning slowly, methodically scanning the room. My breath hitched. They hadn't seen me yet. But where were the creatures from outside? Had they retreated? Then I saw it. Reflected dimly in the darkened screen of a nearby monitor. A tall, gaunt silhouette standing motionless just inside the main doorway. The door was breached. Not smashed down, but somehow, opened. And one of the tall, pale creatures was inside. Standing utterly still. Watching the insectoid things by the hole. It felt like I had stumbled into the middle of a confrontation between two different kinds of nightmares. And I was trapped in the dark corner between them. The insectoids hadn't noticed the tall creature yet, their multifaceted eyes seemingly focused on the immediate area around the breach. The tall creature, however, was definitely aware of them. It remained perfectly still, only its head swiveling slightly, tracking their movements. One of the insectoids took a jerky step away from the hole, its antennae twitching towards my corner. Had it sensed me? Before I could react, the tall creature moved. It unfolded from the doorway with impossible speed, silent as death, covering the distance to the nearest insectoid in a single, fluid motion. Its long, clawed hand lashed out, not slashing, but piercing straight through the insectoid's carapace with a sickening crunch. The insectoid let out a high-pitched shriek, thrashing its legs uselessly. The tall creature lifted it effortlessly, the other two insectoids immediately whipping around, red eyes focusing on the attacker. They emitted a series of rapid, angry clicks, lowering their bodies into an aggressive stance. The tall creature ignored them. It brought the impaled, shrieking insectoid close to its face, a face I still couldn't make out clearly in the dim red light, but seemed disturbingly featureless, and then its head tilted back. A sound like tearing fabric filled the air, followed by a wet, crunching, slurping noise that went on for several horrifying seconds. When it lowered its head again, the insectoid was gone. Consumed entirely. Only a few drops of black, viscous fluid dripped from the tall creature's claws. It dropped the empty carapace husk to the floor with a clatter and turned its attention to the remaining two insectoids, which were now cautiously backing away towards the hole in the floor, clicking nervously. The tall creature took a slow step towards them. It seemed entirely focused on the floor dwellers, having either ignored me or deemed me unimportant for now. This was my chance. My only chance. While the nightmares were distracted with each other, I had to move. Not towards the breached main door, the other two tall creatures were likely just outside. But maybe, the living quarters. Could I lock myself in the small shower room? It wasn't much, but it was another layer of steel between me and them. Slowly, agonizingly, I began to slide out from behind the server rack, keeping my body low, trying to melt into the shadows. The tall creature dispatched the second insectoid with the same brutal efficiency, while the third scrambled back down into the hole it came from. The slurping sound started again. I didn't watch this time. I crawled, crab-like, towards the doorway leading to the living quarters, praying the floor entity wouldn't re-emerge, praying the tall creature wouldn't finish its gruesome meal and turn its attention back to me. The crawl felt like miles. Every scrape of my boot, every ragged breath, seemed amplified in the tense silence, punctuated only by the wet, tearing sounds coming from the center of the operations room. I didn't dare use the flashlight, navigating by the faint, pulsing red glow of the emergency lights reflecting off the sterile surfaces. The doorway to the living quarters was just ahead, a dark rectangle promising flimsy sanctuary. My muscles screamed in protest, particularly the shoulder that had been shot through in another reality, now aching in sympathy or perhaps strain from the earlier chaos. The wrench felt heavy and useless in my grip. I kept glancing back towards the tall creature, silhouetted against the faint light near the floor breach. It was still preoccupied with its gruesome meal, its hunched form convulsing slightly with the effort. Finally, my fingers brushed the cool metal of the doorframe leading to the living area. I pulled myself through, sliding silently onto the thin carpet of the small hallway connecting the bunk room, kitchenette, and shower. The air here felt slightly warmer, less charged with the immediate, visceral horror of the operations room, but the underlying thrum from the earth was still present, perhaps even more noticeable in this smaller space. The shower room was my target. It was the only room with a lockable steel door, albeit a much less substantial one than the main outpost entrance. It was a tiny, cramped space, barely larger than the shower stall itself, with a small toilet and sink crammed in. Minimal, but hopefully secure enough for a few precious minutes. I moved down the short hall, past the kitchenette counter where my half-eaten dinner from hours ago, a lifetime ago, still sat congealing on a plate. The door to the shower room was slightly ajar. I pushed it open gently, peering inside. Empty. Just sterile white tiles gleaming faintly in the red light filtering from the operations room. Slipping inside, I carefully closed the heavy door, wincing as the latch clicked softly. There was a deadbolt, a simple thumb-turn mechanism. I twisted it. The reassuring clack echoed slightly in the tiny space. Safe? No. Safer? Maybe. Marginally. I leaned my back against the cool steel door, sliding down until I was sitting on the floor, legs drawn up to my chest, the wrench resting across my knees. I was shaking, whether from cold, adrenaline, or sheer terror, I couldn't tell. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the horrific images, the sounds, the scream from below, the crunch of carapace, the slurping. What were those things? The tall, pale hunters from outside, and the chittering insectoids from below. Were they related? Enemies? Or was this outpost built on some kind of nexus, a crossroads for different dimensions of nightmare? Henderson, did he know? Is this why he looked so broken? Is this what waited for anyone curious enough to poke the abyss? My thoughts were interrupted by a sound that made my blood freeze all over again. A soft, wet gurgle. Coming from the shower drain at my feet. My eyes snapped open. I scrambled backwards, pressing myself against the toilet, aiming the wrench uselessly towards the small, circular drain cover in the floor of the shower stall. The gurgling continued, accompanied now by a faint splashing sound, like water being disturbed in the pipe below. But there shouldn't be water down there, not much anyway. The outpost had a closed water system, tanks located beneath the main structure but separate from the foundation slab itself. The shower drained into a gray water recycling unit, also located below, but it shouldn't be gurgling. Then, the smell hit me. The same foul, stagnant, decaying odor that had seeped up from the cracks in the floor. It was stronger now, concentrated, rising from the drain. Something thick and black began to bubble up around the edges of the drain cover. Not water. It looked like crude oil, viscous and iridescent in the dim light filtering under the door. The gurgling intensified, turning into a choked, bubbling sound, like someone drowning in mud. The black ooze pulsed, rising higher, spilling out onto the shower floor. And within the blackness, something moved. A pale shape, twisting, struggling. Before I could fully register what I was seeing, a hand erupted from the ooze. Skeletal thin, coated in the black slime, fingers tipped with broken, dirt-caked nails. It clawed frantically at the shower floor, trying to gain purchase. Then another hand appeared beside it. Someone, something, was trying to claw its way up through the shower drain. I couldn't scream. My throat was paralyzed with terror. The hand slipped, scrabbled, then found purchase on the edge of the drain opening. Slowly, agonizingly, a head began to emerge from the bubbling black mire. Matted hair, pale skin stretched taut over a skull-like face, empty eye sockets weeping the black ooze. Its jaw stretched open in a silent scream, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. It looked disturbingly human, or what might have once been human, twisted into a horrifying caricature of life by whatever abyss it had crawled from. It was the thing from the floor. Maybe the one that had retreated. Or another one. How many were there down there? It pulled itself further out, revealing bony shoulders and a gaunt torso. Its movements were weak, jerky, like a marionette with tangled strings. It seemed ancient, decayed, yet driven by a desperate, horrifying hunger. Its sightless face turned, sweeping the small room, somehow sensing my presence in the corner. The wrench felt impossibly light in my hand. Useless. I scanned the tiny room desperately. Nothing. No weapons, no escape. The door was locked, but that felt like a trap now. Opening it meant facing the tall creature outside. Staying meant this. The creature from the drain pulled more of its emaciated body out, its lower half still submerged in the pulsing ooze. It started dragging itself across the shower floor towards me, leaving a trail of black slime. Its silent scream continued, jaw stretched impossibly wide. Then, a thunderous crash echoed from the operations room, shaking the shower door in its frame. Followed by the sound of shattering glass and tortured metal. I risked a glance towards the thin gap under the door. Red light flickered violently. A deep, inhuman roar, different from the subterranean scream, higher pitched, filled with predatory fury, echoed through the outpost. The creature from the drain paused. Its head tilted, listening. The sounds of a violent struggle erupted outside the shower room, heavy impacts, shrieks, bestial snarls, the rending of metal. It sounded like the tall creature was fighting something. But fighting what? The other two from outside? Or had something else emerged from the breach? The creature in the shower turned its sightless face back towards me. It seemed to ignore the chaos outside, its sole focus returning to the only living thing in its immediate vicinity. It resumed its slow, agonizing crawl towards me, skeletal hands clawing at the tiles, black ooze dripping from its silent scream. Closer. Closer. The creature from the drain was relentless. Its slow, dragging crawl only emphasized its horrifying determination. Black ooze smeared the white tiles as it closed the distance, those empty sockets somehow fixed on me, the silent scream stretching its jaw wider, revealing blackened gums and rows of needle-like teeth. The stench intensified, decay, sulfur, and something metallic, like old blood. I was pressed so hard against the toilet bowl I thought the porcelain might crack. The wrench felt like a child's toy. Outside, the battle raged. The sounds were chaotic, brutal. Deep, guttural roars clashed with high-pitched, tearing shrieks. Heavy thuds vibrated through the floor and walls, sounding like bodies being slammed against metal. Once, a piercing scream, distinctly different from the others, more animalistic, perhaps, was cut off abruptly. It wasn't clear who was winning, or even exactly who was fighting, but the violence was escalating. The drain creature was barely 5 feet away now. Its skeletal fingers reached out, trembling slightly, leaving black streaks on the floor. It paused, head tilting again, not towards the sounds outside this time, but towards me. No, towards the wall behind me. Its jaw worked silently, dripping ooze. Was it sensing something? Or just disoriented? A desperate idea sparked in my fear-addled brain. Distraction. Diversion. The creature seemed weak, slow, maybe easily confused. I gripped the wrench tighter. While its attention seemed momentarily diverted, I lunged forward, not attacking, but scrambling sideways, towards the small space between the shower stall and the sink. It reacted instantly. Faster than its crawl suggested it could. Its head snapped back towards me, and one slime-coated arm shot out, clawed fingers scraping against my boot as I scrambled past. I kicked out instinctively, connecting with its gaunt shoulder. It felt brittle, like dry wood, but it barely seemed to register the impact. It just hissed, a low, wet sound finally escaping its throat, and turned its body, pulling itself around to face me again. I was cornered differently now, wedged between the sink pedestal and the shower wall. The creature blocked the path to the door. Its empty sockets seemed to bore into me. It raised both skeletal hands, reaching. Then, the fight outside spilled into the hallway. A tremendous crash, louder than anything before, was followed by the unmistakable sound of the heavy operations room door being ripped from its hinges and slamming against the opposite wall. A guttural roar echoed down the short hallway, closer now, filled with pain and fury. It sounded like the tall, pale creature. The drain creature froze. Its head snapped towards the shower room door, antennae-like remnants of hair quivering. It lowered its reaching hands, pulling itself back slightly, pressing its gaunt body lower against the floor tiles, as if trying to make itself smaller. Fear. Was it afraid of the tall creature? A heavy, staggering thump, approached the shower room door. Something large and wounded was dragging itself down the hallway. A wet, ragged breathing accompanied the footsteps. I held my breath, trapped between the immediate horror crawling towards me and the approaching, potentially greater horror just outside. The drain creature remained utterly still, pressed against the floor, its silent scream fixed on the door. The thumping stopped right outside. The ragged breathing was loud, strained. I could see a dark shape through the frosted glass slit near the top of the door. Tall. Very tall. Then, a sickening crunch echoed from the hallway, followed by a wet tearing sound. The ragged breathing ceased. Silence returned for a beat, broken only by a soft dripping noise. Slowly, deliberately, the handle on the outside of the shower room door began to turn. My eyes darted between the turning handle and the creature on the floor. It hadn't moved. It was watching the door, utterly transfixed. Terror gave way to a desperate, primal surge of adrenaline. This was it. The door was about to open. The tall creature was right there. But the drain creature, it was still between me and the door. And it was terrified of whatever was outside. Could I use it? A shield? A diversion? It was insane, suicidal, but staying put was certain death. Just as the deadbolt on the outside began to slide open with a loud metallic scrape, I acted. With a yell born of pure panic, I kicked the toilet bowl as hard as I could. The porcelain shuddered but held. The sudden noise, however, startled the drain creature. It flinched violently, its head whipping back towards me. In that split second of distraction, I lunged. Not at the creature, but over it. I scrambled onto the sink pedestal, using it as a springboard, throwing myself towards the door just as it began to swing inwards. My timing was off. Instead of clearing the doorway, I slammed shoulder first into the incoming steel door, simultaneously colliding with the pale, gaunt figure standing on the other side. We both went down in a tangle of limbs, me, the door, and the tall creature. I landed partly on top of it, the impact knocking the wind out of me. Its skin felt cold, leathery beneath my hand. It let out a low, surprised hiss. Scrambling frantically, ignoring the searing pain in my shoulder, I tried to push myself off, to get away. My hand slipped on something wet. I looked down. The creature's chest, where I'd landed, was torn open, a ragged, massive wound oozing not red blood, but the same thick, black ichor that coated the drain creature. It was wounded. Badly. Whatever it had been fighting had nearly killed it. Its featureless face turned towards me, black, empty eyes focusing. Its uninjured arm, impossibly long and thin, reached for me, claws extending. Before it could grab me, the creature from the drain surged forward from the shower room with surprising speed, launching itself onto the tall creature's back, its needle teeth sinking into the pale flesh near the wound. The tall creature roared, a sound of agony and fury, thrashing wildly, trying to dislodge the smaller horror clinging to it. It forgot about me entirely, consumed by the attack from behind. I didn't wait. I scrambled backwards, out from under the flailing limbs, grabbing the fallen wrench as I went. I pushed myself to my feet and ran. Ran down the short hallway, past the kitchenette, into the operations room. The scene was worse than I could have imagined. The main door hung off its hinges, bent inwards. The hole in the floor was larger, steaming slightly with that foul odor. But the center of the room was carnage. Another tall, pale creature lay dead, or at least inert, near the door, its body mangled, limbs torn off, surrounded by pools of black ichor. And near the floor breach lay the shattered, chitinous remains of the third insectoid creature I'd seen earlier. It looked like it had exploded from the inside out. The tall creature I'd escaped must have fought both its own kind and the floor dwellers. But who killed the second tall one? And wrecked the insectoid? My question was answered by a low growl from the far side of the room. Standing near the now silent server banks, partially hidden in shadow, was something else entirely. Larger than the insectoids, smaller and bulkier than the tall creatures. It looked vaguely canine, but grotesquely swollen, its skin split in places revealing pulsing, reddish muscle beneath. It had too many legs, jointed like a spider's, and its head was a nightmarish fusion of wolf and beetle, rows of multifaceted eyes gleaming above snapping jaws dripping with saliva. It turned its monstrous head towards me, sniffing the air, letting out another low, menacing growl. It seemed the battle wasn't over. And now, its attention was on me. The canine beetle hybrid took a step out of the shadows, its too many legs clicking softly on the debris-strewn concrete. The red emergency lights gleamed wetly on its multifaceted eyes and dripped saliva from its snapping jaws. It wasn't just wolf and beetle, there was something reptilian in the texture of its swollen, split skin, something insectoid in the twitching antennae near its snout. It was a horrifying amalgamation, a biological impossibility that radiated pure menace. It kept its body low to the ground, powerful haunches tensed, its gaze fixed entirely on me. I gripped the wrench, its smooth metal slippery in my sweaty palm. It felt utterly pathetic against this new monstrosity. Behind me, I could hear faint, wet scrabbling sounds coming from the hallway, the drain creature, maybe. Or the wounded tall one. I didn't dare turn to look. My focus was locked on the hybrid. It took another slow, deliberate step towards me, emitting a low, chesty growl that vibrated through the floor. Unlike the tall creature's unnatural silence or the insectoid's chittering, this thing sounded disturbingly animal. A predator sizing up its prey. I backed away slowly, my injured shoulder screaming in protest, my bruised hand throbbing. My eyes darted around, looking for any advantage, any escape route. The breached main door was closest, but led outside where the other two tall creatures might still be lurking. The hole in the floor? Absolutely not. Back towards the living quarters. That meant turning my back on this thing, and potentially running into whatever was making noise in the hallway. Trapped. Again. The hybrid lowered its head further, sniffing the air, its wolf-like snout twitching. Its multifaceted eyes tracked my every movement. Was it wounded from the previous fight? It didn't appear to be. It moved with a fluid, predatory grace that belied its grotesque form. Whatever killed the second tall creature and the insectoid, this thing seemed to have come out on top, relatively unscathed. Then, it did something unexpected. It stopped advancing. It sat back slightly on its haunches, its head tilted, still watching me, but the immediate aggression seemed to lessen. It let out a soft whine, a sound incongruously familiar, almost like a dog begging for food. What the hell? Was it intelligent? Communicative? Or just playing with me? My flashlight, still clutched in my good hand, flickered weakly. Battery dying. The red emergency lights cast long, dancing shadows, making it hard to track the creature's subtle movements. The low hum from the generator seemed to fluctuate, threatening to die again. The creature whined again, louder this time, and pawed tentatively at the floor with one of its multi-jointed forelegs. It wasn't looking directly at me now, but slightly past me, towards the hallway leading to the living quarters. Towards the sounds I'd heard earlier. Was it warning me? Or was it distracted by another potential victim? A loud clang echoed from the hallway, followed by a wet, tearing sound and a low hiss of pain. The hybrid creature immediately tensed, rising back into its aggressive low stance, its growl returning, deeper now. Its attention snapped back to the hallway entrance. Whatever was making noise back there was still active. And it sounded like it might be the wounded tall creature, perhaps finishing off the drain entity. The hybrid took a hesitant step away from me, towards the hallway, its attention seemingly torn between the threat behind it and the potential meal, me, in front of it. It glanced back at me, multifaceted eyes gleaming, then back towards the hallway, growling low in its throat. An opportunity. A sliver of one. While it was distracted, maybe I could make a break for the main door. It was damaged, hanging open, but it led outside. Away from the immediate, claustrophobic horror. The risk of the other tall creatures being out there was immense, but staying inside felt like a guaranteed death sentence with these things seemingly drawn to the outpost. Just as I tensed, preparing to run, the generator sputtered. The red lights flickered violently, plunging the room into near-total darkness for a terrifying second before weakly reasserting themselves. In that moment of near darkness, illuminated only by my dying flashlight beam sweeping across the room in panic, I saw something else. Near the hole in the floor, where the third insectoid had retreated earlier. A shape. Emerging. Not another insectoid. Not the drain creature. Something else. Large. Bulbous. Pale and fleshy, like a gigantic grub, studded with those same glowing red eyes, dozens of them blinking sluggishly in the weak light. It pulsed, slowly undulating as it began to pull its immense, soft body up through the breach. The generator died. This time, the darkness was absolute. The emergency lights were gone. My flashlight gave one final, pathetic flicker and died. Total blackness. And the only sounds were the low growl of the hybrid creature somewhere in front of me, the wet scrabbling from the hallway behind me, and now, a new sound, a soft, repulsive, slithering noise coming from the center of the room, accompanied by that same soul-chilling subterranean stench, thicker and more nauseating than ever. Something immense and ancient was pulling itself into the room with me, and I couldn't see a damn thing. The blackness was a living entity. It pressed against my eardrums, filled my lungs, tasted like dust and ozone. My only anchors were the sounds, the low, guttural growl of the hybrid creature somewhere ahead and to my left, the faint, wet, dragging scrabble from the hallway behind me, a sound that spoke of broken things struggling to move, and the newest, most repulsive sound, a soft, thick, undulating slither accompanied by rhythmic, wet clicks, emanating from the center of the room near the breach. Adding to the horror was the stench, now almost unbearable, a physical presence in the dark, ancient decay, stagnant water, sharp metallic ichor, and the sulfurous undertone I associated with the scream from below. I remained frozen in my corner, the useless wrench clutched tight. My blindness was absolute. Every nerve ending screamed. To move was to announce my position, to stay still felt like waiting for the inevitable. The floor vibrated faintly, not just with the earth's hum, but with the movements of the abominations sharing this confined space. The slithering sound grew louder, punctuated by soft, wet, plopping noises, like thick mud dropping onto concrete. I could feel the air shift, a subtle pressure change indicating something massive was displacing the space nearby. The grub thing. It was fully in the room, moving with a horrifyingly quiet purpose. Suddenly, a choked, high-pitched shriek tore through the darkness from the hallway behind me. It was followed immediately by a sickening crunch, the sound of bone giving way, and then a final, wet, tearing finality. The scrabbling sound ceased. Absolute silence from the hallway now. My heart hammered against my ribs. What had happened? Had the wounded tall creature finally died? Had it eliminated the drain entity? Or had something else entirely dealt with whatever lingered back there? The hybrid creature reacted instantly. Its low growl escalated into a series of sharp, aggressive barks, directed towards the now silent hallway entrance. I heard its claws click rapidly on the floor as it shifted its stance, turning its bulk to face the new potential threat. It seemed agitated, uncertain. Then, lightning flashed again, brighter this time, a sustained flicker that lasted a precious second or two, searing the scene onto my retinas before plunging me back into disorienting blackness. The hybrid, tensed like a cornered wolf, facing the empty hallway entrance, its multiple eyes reflecting the momentary flash. The hallway entrance, empty, but glistening trails of black ichor smeared the floor leading from it. The center of the room, the grub thing. Immense, pulsating, pale. Its vaguely humanoid upper torso, featureless and slick, was bent over the shattered carapace of one of the insectoids. Long, pale arms ended in multi-fingered hands that were tearing chunks from the husk and stuffing them into a maw that opened just below the torso, a vertical slit filled with churning, organic-looking machinery rather than teeth. Dozens of red eyes blinked sluggishly across its quivering bulk. And the tall creature, it wasn't there. The spot where it had been feeding was empty. The afterimage faded, leaving me blind once more, but with horrifying clarity. The hybrid was distracted. The grub was feeding. And the wounded tall creature was gone. Or had it been the source of the final shriek from the hallway? Hope, desperate and thin, flickered. The main door. Damaged, yes, but open. Outside. Maybe the other two tall creatures had pursued the wounded one into the hallway. Maybe they were gone. It was a long shot, based on nothing but frantic hope, but it was the only shot I had. Taking a breath so shallow it barely stirred the air, I began to move. Pushing myself silently away from the server rack, staying agonizingly low, trying to navigate by memory and the faint spatial awareness afforded by the echoing sounds in the absolute dark. towards the main entrance. One slow step. The hybrid whined softly, still focused on the hallway. The grub continued its wet, sucking feeding noises. 2 steps. My boot sole grated slightly on a patch of concrete dust. I froze. 3 steps. Almost halfway there. The air felt colder near the door, the night wind perhaps finding its way through the breach. My foot snagged on something, the discarded foam sealant canister. It rolled a few inches with a hollow plastic clatter. Instant silence. The hybrid's whine cut off. The grub's feeding noises stopped. Even the low hum from the earth seemed to hold its breath. Every alien sense in that room locked onto the sound. Locked onto me. A low growl, deeper than before, resonated from the hybrid's direction. From the center of the room, a soft, wet click, followed by the sound of the grub's immense bulk shifting, turning. They knew exactly where I was. There was no more time for stealth. With a strangled cry, I lunged, throwing myself the remaining distance towards the faint rectangular outline of the breached doorway, praying I could make it through, praying whatever waited outside was somehow less terrible than what pursued me from within. I heard the hybrid roar, a sound of unleashed fury, and the thunderous impact of its multiple legs hitting the floor as it launched itself after me. Simultaneously, the slithering surged, impossibly fast for something so large, a wave of displaced air rushing towards me, carrying that suffocating stench. My outstretched hand hit the bent metal frame of the doorway. Freedom. The cold night air hit my face. I burst through, ready to run, to scramble into the darkness, to face whatever might be out there. And slammed directly into something unyielding yet strangely pliable, like hitting a wall of densely packed muscle wrapped in cold leather. Instantly, 2 impossibly long, impossibly strong arms clamped around me like steel bands, pinning my own arms, lifting me clean off my feet. My breath left me in a whoosh. My face was pressed against a cold, leathery surface that smelled faintly of ozone and something else, something indescribably ancient and alien. I was lifted higher, turned slightly. Through the ringing in my ears and the frantic pounding of my heart, I registered the low growl of the hybrid skidding to a halt just inside the doorway behind me. I heard the wet slither of the grub thing approaching the threshold. Then, I was staring directly into the blank, featureless expanse that served as the face of one of the tall, pale creatures. The other stood motionless beside it, a sentinel of nightmare. They hadn't left. They hadn't pursued their wounded kin. They had simply waited. Right outside the door. Patient. Silent. And I had delivered myself right into their grasp. Suspended helplessly in the creature's grasp, the cold night air felt like ice against my sweat-soaked skin. My face was inches from its smooth, pale head. There were no features in the traditional sense, no eyes, no nose, no mouth, just subtle indentations and ridges beneath the leathery skin, suggesting a sensory apparatus utterly alien. Yet I felt its attention, a cold, analytical focus radiating from that blank expanse. The smell of ozone and something indescribably ancient, like dust from a long-dead star, filled my nostrils. Its grip was crushing, effortlessly pinning my arms, making each breath a shallow, painful effort. Behind me, from the breached doorway of the outpost, came the low, guttural growl of the hybrid and the soft, wet clicking of the grub thing. They remained framed in the doorway, seemingly hesitant to emerge fully into the open or to challenge the tall creatures holding me. A tense standoff unfolded in the pulsating red glow spilling from the ruined building. The tall creatures ignored the entities inside, their focus entirely on me, their captive. The creature holding me shifted its grip slightly, turning me so I faced the second tall creature standing nearby. This one, too, was featureless, a towering silhouette against the dark, wind-swept desert. It tilted its head, mimicking the motion of its companion, studying me with that same unseen, unnerving scrutiny. Were they communicating? Assessing? Deciding my fate? Panic clawed at my throat. I tried to struggle, a pathetic, reflexive twitch against the unyielding grip. The creature holding me barely seemed to notice, but a low sound emanated from its chest, not a growl, but a deep, resonant thrum, similar to the vibration I'd felt from the earth, but purer, more focused. It felt less like a sound and more like a physical wave washing over me, through me. My teeth vibrated. My vision blurred momentarily. It felt like, scanning. Probing. Then, as suddenly as it began, the thrumming stopped. The creature holding me lowered me slightly, my boots scraping against the sandy dirt. Its companion took a step closer. They both leaned in, their blank faces hovering just above mine. From inside the outpost, the hybrid let out a short, sharp bark, drawing their attention for a fraction of a second. The tall creatures swiveled their heads in unison towards the doorway, a low hiss escaping the one holding me. The hybrid instantly fell silent, backing away slightly into the shadows of the operations room. The slithering of the grub thing also retreated further inside. A clear hierarchy. The tall creatures were dominant. Their attention returned to me. The second creature extended a long, multi-jointed finger, tipped with a wickedly sharp, black claw. It moved with unnerving slowness towards my face. I flinched, turning my head away, squeezing my eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable pain, the tearing of flesh. Instead, the claw gently, almost delicately, touched the side of my head, near my temple. It lingered there for a moment, impossibly cold against my skin. The deep thrumming sound returned, quieter this time, localized, focusing where the claw made contact. It felt like icy needles probing directly into my skull, into my thoughts. Images flashed behind my closed eyelids, Henderson's terrified face, the Array 7 console displaying the rhythmic pulse, the subterranean scream, the map of the outpost, the deep resonance scan controls. It was reading me. Extracting information, memories. The intrusion lasted only a few seconds, but felt like an eternity. When the claw retracted and the thrumming ceased, I gasped, shuddering violently. The creature holding me adjusted its grip again, lifting me slightly higher. Its companion stepped back. Then, the one holding me began to move. Not back towards the outpost, but away from it, carrying me effortlessly out into the open desert. Its companion fell into step beside it. They moved with a long, loping, unnervingly silent gait across the uneven ground, their strides covering distance with deceptive speed. I twisted my head, looking back in desperation. The red glow of the ruined outpost dwindled rapidly behind us. The hybrid and the grub thing remained dark shapes in the doorway, watching us depart, making no move to follow. Where were they taking me? What did they want? What had they seen in my mind? The cold desert wind whipped at my face, carrying the scent of sagebrush and the faint, unsettling smell of ozone that clung to my captors. Above, the stars spread across the black sky, indifferent, impossibly distant. We moved for what felt like several minutes, the outpost now just a faint red smudge on the horizon. They seemed to be heading towards a cluster of jagged rock formations silhouetted against the slightly less black sky to the west. As we drew closer, I noticed a faint, intermittent blue light pulsing rhythmically from within the rocks, almost like a weak strobe. Thump, thump, thump. My blood ran cold. It wasn't light. It was Array 7. Or something like it. That same rhythmic pulse I had detected deep underground, now manifesting visually, here on the surface, miles from the outpost sensor grid. The creatures slowed as we entered the narrow gaps between the tall, wind-carved rocks. The pulsing blue light intensified, casting eerie shadows, illuminating strange, non-geological structures embedded within the rock faces, smooth, dark panels, coiled conduits, things that looked disturbingly technological, yet ancient and weathered. In the center of a small clearing, nestled amongst the rocks, was the source of the light. It wasn't a machine. It was a fissure. A jagged crack in the desert floor, perhaps 20 feet long and only a foot or two wide, from which the pulsing blue light emanated, along with a faint, high-pitched hum. Looking down into it, I couldn't see a bottom, only shifting patterns of blue energy that seemed to stretch down into infinity. The creatures stopped at the edge of the glowing fissure. The one holding me turned, positioning me directly over the crack in the earth. The pulsing blue light bathed my face, warm, unlike the coldness of the creatures. The high-pitched hum intensified, resonating in my teeth, my bones. This was it. They were going to drop me. Throw me into whatever abyss this was. Retribution for triggering the scan. A sacrifice. The creature lowered me slowly, until my feet dangled just above the glowing energy. It tilted its head again, that cold, analytical focus returning. It made a series of soft clicking sounds, utterly alien, directed at its companion. The companion clicked back. A conversation I couldn't possibly comprehend. Then, the creature holding me spoke. Not with a mouth, it had none. The sound simply emanated from its chest cavity, a sibilant whisper synthesized directly into my mind, bypassing my ears entirely. Interference. Aberration. Correction required. The words were cold, emotionless, clinical. Correction. Me. Was I the interference? Before I could process the terrifying implications, it opened its grip. And I fell. Plummeting into the pulsing blue light, into the high-pitched hum, into the crack in the world, leaving the silent, watching nightmares behind as the abyss swallowed me whole. Falling. But not like falling through air. It was thicker, denser, like plunging through electrified syrup. The pulsing blue light wasn't just visual, it was tactile, a tingling energy that permeated my clothes, my skin, vibrating deep within my bones. The high-pitched hum escalated, filling my head, overwhelming thought, becoming the only reality. It wasn't just sound, it was information, raw data flooding my senses, geometric patterns, flashes of alien landscapes, discordant musical notes, sensations of impossible cold and burning heat simultaneously. My mind struggled to process the onslaught, threatening to fragment under the pressure. There was no sense of acceleration, no wind rushing past. Just the feeling of being pulled, drawn downwards through this energetic conduit. The blue light shifted, colors bleeding into the spectrum, violet, green, searing white, before coalescing back into that intense, unwavering blue. Time dilated, stretched, became meaningless. Was I falling for seconds or centuries? Then, the sensation changed. The thick energy thinned abruptly. The intense hum dropped in pitch, becoming a low, resonant thrum like the one I'd felt from the earth, but calmer now, almost, stable. The feeling of being pulled ceased, replaced by a sudden, jarring impact. Not onto rock or water. Onto something yielding yet firm, like landing on densely packed, slightly damp earth covered in thick moss. The impact knocked the already scarce air from my lungs. I gasped, sucking in air that was cool, damp, and heavy with the scent of wet stone, loam, and something else, a faint, sweet, cloying aroma like overripe fruit or decaying flowers. Darkness. Not the absolute blackness of the powerless outpost, but a deep, profound gloom. The blue light from the fissure above was gone, sealed off perhaps, or maybe I had fallen far beyond its reach. Faint, ambient light filtered from somewhere unseen, just enough to make out vague shapes once my eyes adjusted. I pushed myself up, groaning. Every muscle ached from the tension of the fall and the earlier struggles. My shoulder throbbed relentlessly. I patted myself down. The wrench was gone, lost during the fall. I was unarmed, injured, and utterly lost in a place that felt impossibly alien. I seemed to be in a vast cavern. The floor beneath me was indeed covered in a thick, spongy, dark green moss that cushioned my landing. High above, lost in the gloom, I could just discern the vague outline of a ceiling, but it was too far to make out any details. The air was still, heavy, and unnervingly silent now that the hum had faded to a barely perceptible background vibration. Where the hell was I? Was this deep underground, beneath the Wyoming desert? Or had I fallen through into somewhere else entirely? The sweet, decaying smell pricked at my nostrils. Slowly, painfully, I got to my feet. My legs felt weak, shaky. I scanned the immediate area. The mossy ground stretched out around me, uneven, rolling slightly. Here and there, strange, bioluminescent fungi clung to the ground or sprouted from unseen crevices, casting faint, shifting patches of sickly green and pale blue light, the source of the minimal illumination. They pulsed gently, like slow heartbeats. In the distance, barely visible in the gloom, rose colossal pillars that seemed to merge with the unseen ceiling. They weren't natural rock formations. They looked carved, grown. Smooth, dark, vaguely organic-looking columns ribbed with intricate, repeating patterns that seemed to absorb the faint light. Correction required. The telepathic words echoed in my mind. What did they mean? Was this place the correction? A prison? A dumping ground? I took a hesitant step, my boot sinking slightly into the spongy moss. Silence. I took another. Still nothing but the faint thrum and the whisper of my own breathing. I needed to find a way out, needed to understand where I was. Which way to go? There were no clear paths, just the vast expanse of moss and the distant, colossal pillars. I chose a direction, towards the nearest group of pillars, hoping they marked a wall or some kind of exit, and started walking, or rather, limping. My shoulder protested with every step, and my whole body felt bruised and battered. The silence was unnerving. After the chaos in the outpost, this profound stillness felt unnatural, menacing in its own way. It felt like the quiet before something happens. As I moved closer to the pillars, their sheer scale became apparent. They were immense, dwarfing anything man-made I had ever seen. The intricate patterns covering them weren't just decorative, they seemed to shift subtly in my peripheral vision, creating optical illusions, tricks of the faint, pulsing light. Then I saw something else. Clustered around the base of one of the massive pillars, half hidden by the thick moss and glowing fungi. Shapes. Small, hunched shapes. Motionless. My heart leaped into my throat. Were they creatures? More nightmares native to this subterranean world. I slowed my approach, straining my eyes in the gloom. They weren't creatures. They were people. Or at least, they looked like people. 3 figures, huddled together, backs against the pillar, facing outwards. They were dressed in rags, filthy and torn. They sat utterly still, heads bowed, seemingly unaware of my approach. Relief warred with caution. Survivors? Other victims dropped into this abyss? Hello. I called out, my voice sounding weak, absorbed by the cavern's immensity. Can you hear me? The figures didn't react. Not a twitch, not a sound. Closer now, I could see them more clearly. Their skin was pale, almost gray in the fungal light. Their hair was lank, greasy. They looked emaciated, starved. But it was their eyes, or lack thereof, that stopped me cold. Their eyelids were sealed shut, fused together by thick, scar-like tissue, as if they had been deliberately, brutally blinded. And their mouths, their lips were similarly fused, sealed into a permanent, silent grimace. They weren't just sitting there. They were, rooted. Thick, moss-like tendrils grew from their rags, from their limbs, anchoring them to the ground, merging them with the spongy floor around the pillar's base. They were alive, I could see the faint rise and fall of their chests, but imprisoned, blinded, silenced, slowly being consumed by the very environment they inhabited. Horror washed over me. This wasn't a sanctuary. It wasn't just a prison. It was a farm. A garden of suffering. And these poor souls were the crop. Correction required. My gaze snapped back towards the direction I had come from, towards the unseen spot where I had landed. Was this the correction? To be rooted here, blind and silent, slowly absorbed by this place until I became just another part of the landscape. A soft, wet plop sounded nearby. I whipped my head around. One of the bioluminescent fungi pulsed brighter for a moment. Then another plop. Something was dripping from the ceiling high above, landing on the mossy ground not far from the rooted figures. I watched, transfixed in horror, as a thick, translucent drop, like heavy condensation, fell from the darkness above and landed near the base of the pillar. The moss seemed to sizzle faintly where it struck. Another drop fell, then another. It was slow, rhythmic. Then one of the rooted figures stirred. Its sealed head lifted slightly, turning blindly towards the dripping sound. A low moan escaped from somewhere deep within its chest, muffled by the fused lips. It strained against the tendrils anchoring it, a pathetic, futile movement. The dripping was feeding them. Or feeding off them. Keeping them alive in this state of perpetual, silent agony. My stomach churned. I had to get out of here. Now. Before those tendrils found me. Before I became another silent statue in this grotesque garden. I turned, ready to flee in the opposite direction, away from the pillars, away from the dripping, away from the silent sufferers. And found my path blocked. Standing silently on the moss, having approached without a sound, was another figure. Not pale and gaunt like the tall creatures. Not insectoid or hybrid. This one looked human. Disturbingly so. Dressed in clothes that looked vaguely familiar, worn jeans, a faded flannel shirt, hiking boots. But its eyes, they glowed with the same faint, sickly green bioluminescence as the fungi surrounding us. And its smile, stretched too wide, filled with too many teeth, predatory and utterly devoid of warmth. It tilted its head, that horrifying smile widening. Lost, it rasped, its voice like dry leaves skittering across stone. Don't worry. You'll take root soon enough. The entity's glowing green eyes bored into me, the impossibly wide smile stretching its deceptively human features into a predatory mask. Lost, it rasped again, the sound like stones grinding together. Don't worry. You'll take root soon enough. My mind recoiled from the implication, the image of those silent, blinded figures fused with the moss flashing vividly. This wasn't just a threat, it was a statement of inevitable fact in this place. The correction. Taking root. Stay away from me, I choked out, taking an involuntary step back. My boots squelched softly in the thick moss. The wrench I no longer held felt like a phantom limb, its absence leaving my hands terrifyingly empty. The entity chuckled, a dry, rattling sound that scraped along my nerves. It tilted its head, mimicking curiosity, but the green eyes held only cold amusement. Why leave? The garden is peaceful. Quiet. No more running. No more troublesome thoughts. Just, belonging. It gestured vaguely towards the colossal pillars and the rooted figures at their base. They understand. They've found their purpose. You did that to them, I accused, trying to keep my voice steady, stalling for time, desperately scanning the gloomy surroundings for any potential weapon or escape route. The glowing fungi pulsed rhythmically, casting shifting, unreliable light. I helped them embrace the correction, the entity corrected smoothly. As I will help you. The energy here, it changes things. Anchors them. Integrates them. It took a step closer, moving with a disturbing grace, its hiking boots barely disturbing the moss. It looked like a hiker, maybe someone who'd gotten lost out here years ago, but twisted, changed by this place. Possessed. Consumed. Become one with it. Who are you? I demanded, backing away further. I am the will of this place, it replied, smile widening further, showing rows of sharp, slightly too long teeth. The gardener in the quiet dark. And you, newcomer, are a weed. An anomaly brought here for correction. It mimicked the cold, clinical tone of the tall creatures. It had heard them. Or perhaps it was them, in a different form. No time to figure it out. It was closer now, maybe 15 feet away. Its glowing eyes never left mine. I feinted slightly to my left, watching its reaction. It shifted instantly, mirroring my movement, cutting off that angle. Fast. Deceptively fast. My eyes darted towards a dense cluster of the bioluminescent fungi growing near the base of a smaller, rock-like outcrop a short distance away. I remembered the dripping liquid from the ceiling causing the moss to sizzle. Were the fungi themselves dangerous? Caustic? Emitting something harmful? It was a wild guess, born of desperation. I bolted. Not left, but hard right, towards the glowing patch, hoping to use the outcrop and the fungi as cover or maybe even a weapon. The entity reacted instantly, abandoning its casual stance and launching itself forward with terrifying speed. It didn't run like a human, it flowed across the moss, its movements unnervingly fluid, almost serpentine, closing the distance rapidly. Nowhere to run, little weed, it hissed, its voice losing its rasp, becoming higher, more excited. I scrambled, my injured shoulder screaming, my lungs burning in the damp, heavy air. The outcrop was just ahead, the fungal light intensifying, casting my shadow long and distorted behind me. The entity was gaining, its breathing now audible, a low, eager panting. Just as I reached the edge of the outcrop, ready to dive behind it or maybe grab a clump of the glowing fungus, a new sound echoed through the vast cavern. It wasn't a creature sound. It wasn't the dripping. It was deep, resonant, and utterly unexpected. A low, metallic groan, like ancient, colossal gears grinding into motion after centuries of disuse. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, vibrating through the mossy floor, through the very air. Gruen. The entity skidded to a halt just feet behind me. Its head snapped upwards, towards the unseen ceiling, then swiveled towards the colossal pillars in the distance. The predatory smile vanished instantly, replaced by an expression I couldn't immediately decipher in the gloom. Surprise? Annoyance? Or was it fear? The groaning intensified, joined by a series of heavy, rhythmic clanks, like immense chains being dragged across stone, originating from deep within the cavern, perhaps near the cluster of pillars where the rooted figure sat. Clank. Gruen. Clank. The entity took a hesitant step back from me, its glowing green eyes no longer focused on me, but darting nervously between the pillars and the unseen source of the groaning above. It let out a low, uneasy whine, utterly different from its earlier predatory sounds. What was happening? What was that noise? Was it some kind of defense mechanism of this place? Or was something else waking up? The ground beneath us began to vibrate, not with the subtle thrum from before, but with a heavy, powerful tremor synchronized with the clanking sounds. Dust and small bits of debris began to drift down from the cavern ceiling high above. The entity seemed to forget me entirely now. It backed away further, crouching low, its head swiveling rapidly, glowing eyes wide with what was unmistakably alarm. It let out a series of short, sharp hisses, directed towards the pillars. Clank. Gruen. Clank. The sounds were closer now, louder, echoing deafeningly in the immense space. The pillars themselves seemed to vibrate. The bioluminescent fungi pulsed erratically, their light flickering like faulty neon signs. Then, near the base of the largest pillar, where the blinded figures were rooted, the mossy ground began to heave upwards. Not cracking like the concrete, but bulging, tearing, as something immense pushed its way towards the surface from below. The entity let out a high-pitched shriek of pure terror and turned, fleeing back into the darkness from which it had emerged, disappearing into the gloom near the cavern walls. Leaving me alone. Frozen between the terrifying, unknown mechanism grinding into life around the pillars, and the heaving earth giving birth to some new horror. The rhythmic clanking felt like the countdown to an apocalypse I couldn't begin to comprehend.